He is nucleus to our glorified Adam, and phantom pain on Revelation's ominous Eve. He is circular logic and Atlas, a ringmaster, still present after the audience dismissal. While jumping through hoops, you may ask one day, where is he? He is within the fabric of your knowledge. He is Columbus Myth.
Dido and Justin practiced their routine together outside of CoShow Theater, right next to Linda's haunted statue. Dido remembers seeing Linda's statue move once while she was on her way to Commerce. Justin sees she's distracted and asks her,
"What's wrong?"
She's still here, haunting me. I see her shadow when I practice alone, and once I saw her as though she were alive again. I balanced on one end of a high wire and she was on the other, mirroring me. I tripped and fell, and next I knew I was lying on the ground. And she spoke to me without using words. She said telepathically, "Earth is ground soiled by death, a fertilizer, and lightning wants to rest where there is one, quiet, alone, in open ground. Language comes later, but for now you are becoming one with the ground, struck by lightning truth. If you want life, you have no choice but to stand on belief. You have no choice but to stand on ground soiled by death. If you choose life, belief is solid ground."
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Dido reports seeing Linda as though Linda's ghost is targeting her. But she knows Linda dies. She knows the secret that Justin and Castor are keeping. She knows Columbus deleted Linda's avatar.
Well, thank you, Coco Princess 27. Come in. Good evening, sir.
What is this I hear of you sneaking around in underground virtual reality?
Similarly, though, before Linda died, Linda said something about feeling haunted.
I feel haunted sometimes because the oppression I face is invisible to the majority of people. I feel haunted. Like when I address the oppression, I'm addressing a figment of my imagination, and everyone around me sees me talking to the air. They think I'm crazy. So not only am I addressing the oppression and dealing with the personal effects of it, but I'm crazy too. But online, I'm understood.
Come quickly!
It's Linda!
Call an ambulance!
Online, she's understood. Linda said it herself. She used Justin's virtual world along with her avatar because she felt her soul had found an accepting community there. And we learned from Einstein, Paul, Castor, and Digits that once your avatar is inside the machine, your soul connects to that image when your real-world body expires.
Linda, in her final mass, pale, lifeless. Was it murder? Who could have gotten past security? She's gone.
Linda's soul has ascended into the machine. But now she haunts Dido. Why?
I stand over the circus reminding CoShowians that they must stay in line. Like a ghost, not seen but present. Like the oppression I once felt when I was living. A silent ghost, haunting only the oppressed.
Einstein, Dido's father, and Goose, Dido's mother, were both orphaned by the public district as infants and sent to the private district for cyborg upbringing. They're both cyborgs and performers now who keep the public district entertained. Their daughter, Dido, was born in the private district, so she was never rejected from the public and given a mechanical finish. She's human, not cyborg like her peers. But because of her human form, she's more relatable to the human audience, the public district. Since Castor brought back video, picture, and all forms of moving image, Dido is the perfect, relatable performer to take Linda's place as star. Her relatability will bring in the most trust for Castor's show and the entire city. Dido's father wants her to pass down the work he has done on his system, mythology. Castor wants Dido to focus on bringing in trust. Justin and Dido's peers want her to step down as the representative of their cyborg society because she is not cyborg at all. With all this pressure, Dido has secretly found ground on the other side of the fence. She's found ground in the public district. What is ground? Find out as we follow Goose through Civil War, the 9th episode of Columbus Myth.
Have you ever felt trapped by the language you speak? Like somehow the words you are taught to use are as constricting as those bars around Linda's lion cage? It's like a definition of a word is infinite, like the definition of a word is equal to pi, 3.14159, and so on. The ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. It's no wonder why we talk in circles with people who disagree with your definition of even one word you use in a sentence.
Goose, the strong woman, speaks with her husband Einstein. Einstein listens to his wife, though his mind was on revealing to his wife the change he had to make to the machine's program. Through Castor's request, he had to change the machine's program from mythology to science.
And that disagreement can lead to war, which is why I find that it's so important to have ground. You know, a culture or a religion. That way all words are defined with little misunderstanding because the group experiences those words in the same context. The connotations are the same that way. Can you imagine? A war over semantics? Like the Great Civil War that started our very existence as a society split between public and private districts. Are you listening to me?
Yes, dear.
What are you thinking about?
Nothing. I just...
You're awfully quiet.
I was listening to you, dear. You were talking about the Great Civil War that created our existence. Semantics.
Think about it mathematically. How does one really define a word? Do you define a word by using other words? Then how do you define each of those other words, and so on and so forth? What it really comes down to is experience. How you learn each word. The connotations connected to each and every word you know. And if you think about it, everyone's connotation to every word is personal and different, and people are rarely aware of this. The way I see it, an argument is simply a misunderstanding on an atomic level. An atom is the smallest constituent unit of ordinary matter. A word is the smallest of a thought or story or theology. If connotation differs in just one word, a conversation begins, an explanation begins, and then a rebuttal, followed by a disagreement. If a disagreement between theologies becomes stubborn, tension and exhaustion from the argument might finally bring on a violent war. A war of physical matter, all driven by illusion of freedom of speech. If we were truly free, we wouldn't need to use language at all, if you ask me. But I guess that's the privilege I have from being able to connect to the machine.
Goose is the strong woman for CoShow Circus, but her occupation offstage is served as the community librarian. She's a bit of an historian. Goose is also cyborg, but when she speaks of connecting to the machine, she speaks of her finish. Remember, a finish is a mechanical addition to the human body, one that fixes the flaw that caused rejection from the public district. Goose's finish gives her superhuman strength, and along with that physical strength comes the mental power to connect to the machine through meditation. She has a constant connection to the zeitgeist, and she feels that something is brewing. She feels it has something to do with Linda, Columbus, and Digit's disappearances. She feels that her husband knows about what's happening. Her conversation about semantics, history, and Civil War is her way of fishing for information from her husband. She knows something is up. Something in regards to history, semantics, war, Columbus, Linda, and Digits. For historical reference, I'll clue you into the public and private district's historical beginnings. A long time ago, a war began from two theologies that separated due to misunderstanding on an atomic level. Black Lives Matter started as a way to bring attention to specific problems facing Black communities. All Lives Matter countered because there was a misunderstanding of terms. Black. Some people misunderstood who these Black people were. Lives. Some people misunderstood the context of how this word is used in this specific circumstance. Matter. A physical measurement of existence that some misunderstood because of their perspective and point of reference. Not all can see matter that exists simply due to perspective. Injustice is measured by the oppressed and not always seen by the oppressor. Speech can help explain the matter to those who can't see the matter. Speech can help in 3D printing, bringing ideas to a physical state. Freedom of speech allows for freedom to produce matter, like Digits, for example. Digits was mute when he was alive in the real world as a clown, but now that he is inside the machine, he can speak and he can influence the data in their mass consciousness, causing those who log into the machine to become 3D printers, making physical matter from the data he manipulates. This happened years ago as well, and from this, there became an argument about what was real and what wasn't. Like Linda existing to Dido as a ghost of oppression, Dido is the only one who can measure her existence as real. Linda's life matters to those who measure her. Linda's life doesn't matter to those who do not know if she exists. Goose feels this cognitive dissonance. She doesn't want to ask her husband if he knows something about Linda, Columbus, and Digits, but she does want to know. She feels a war brewing. She feels a disagreement on an atomic level like one that led to an explosion centuries ago.
I don't want to pry, but is something the matter?
Nothing is the matter, dear. Why do you ask?
Well, no reason. You just seem stressed. Is that a dove feather?
Paul stopped by my office.
Well, I won't ask you why if you say you're not stressed and nothing's bothering you. I trust you're telling me the truth, or at least what you think is true.
You're a good wife.
Goose and her husband eat the dinner Goose prepared. She continues her conversation about war brewing. She can't get the thought off of her mind. The explosion from ancient years started when videos of Dove killing citizens were spread online through social media. They were videos taken from witnesses' data phones. They called them cell phones then. These citizens were either innocent or guilty of small, petty crimes not worthy of death. But Dove was seen acting as judge, jury, and executioner within a split second. More importantly, the victims were of a race once enslaved just a century prior. This race, now free from slavery but entangled in the effects of a culture built around the theology of superiority of their oppressors. By common mythology, those oppressors were known as white, and the once enslaved people were known by the same mythology as black. In this mythology, other adjectives described black people as subhuman and scientifically criminal. Back then, their mythology was called science. Goose brings up the old ways of science at dinner.
I'm just glad we don't run on science like those ancient days.
I don't know. Maybe science wasn't so bad. You said yourself that at one point in history, science and mythology were interchanged. Maybe their science was our mythology.
That's true, my dear. You are so often right. At the time of the switch, white supremacy was in its very last leg. The leader of the country was black and well liked, not only by his country, but by nations worldwide. And popular culture was largely influenced by black culture. But some people were uncomfortable with the movement. Some people were afraid that the end of white supremacy meant a war on white people. Most people who supported Black Lives Matter had no such goal. They only wanted equality and justice. But one day, after a storm of emotions in response to more videos of murders of black men at the hand of Dove, an Army veteran shot and killed 5 white doves at the end of a peaceful protest. This Army veteran was not a part of the protest, but some people couldn't separate the sniper from the organized Black Lives Matter movement. The sniper said that he set out to kill white doves. This put validity to fears of people against Black Lives Matter. Those who feared retaliation coined the slogan, All Lives Matter, in response to Black Lives Matter. The All Lives Matter wasn't a movement, but rather a slogan in the hopes to trump the statement that Black Lives Matter. Some who used All Lives Matter misunderstood Black Lives Matter. They thought that Black Lives Matter was saying that Black lives matter more than white lives. So they pushed that All Lives Matter should be the slogan for any kind of civil rights movement. Folks who used the Black Lives Matter slogan explained that they were focusing on the black community. Of course, all lives matter, but all is misrepresented as white. During this time, images of white people were used to represent everyone in movies, advertisements, books, and so on. White supremacy still ruled. When the first black president's term was over, a white reality show host who had absolutely no experience governing was elected president. He was unpopular domestically and overseas and was a Nazi sympathizer who white nationalists admired. White nationalist groups began to march against the idea of removing Confederate statues and symbols, but did so with hate speech against groups of people who were not white. One white supremacist drove a car through a group of anti-racist protesters, killing a woman and injuring 19 other protesters. The new president did not condemn white nationalists harshly, stating that those who were there to promote white superiority had a permit to be there and those who opposed racism did not. White nationalists were encouraged and continued to march under the protection of the First Amendment. As far as ground is concerned, religion and culture were unconsciously run on the idea that white people were made in the image of God. Images of people of color were mostly used to represent the idea of the other.
How did anyone know white supremacy was over? How could they tell it ended?
Those who copied the mold in order to succeed were the first to know public inigo. They didn't have this term back then, but those who were practicing public inigo in order to pass were the first to know white supremacy was ending. They suddenly didn't have a clear model to copy, and those who didn't know that this was happening suddenly did, and started searching for answers instead of standing still as models of perfection. You see, if the mask drops, the strongest face you have is your own. Those who thought their faces were the mask took the end of white supremacy personally. Those who knew they were wearing a mask had to use their own faces and defend them.
Like Linda, when she needed to curl her hair to get a job.
They call them beauty standards. They are not really standards of beauty. They are standards of power. Images translate into meaningful symbols. Images are symbols. It's just the way the human mind works. If you don't tell a person this or fail to educate a community about this, you can use image to your advantage. Back then, media represented all people with the use of one image, but when that image faded, people who believed in it and people who structured their lives around public inigo entered into a fog that cleared only after people began defending their own images. They call it all supremacy. It's insidious. Details are important in all supremacy. You might even have to change a word so that it doesn't cause discomfort when you talk about it, so that it can relate to all. We separate it into two camps, all and one. All lives matter and our lives matter. There was a violent civil war between them. Eventually, a resolution was made. They would live separately but equally. They would agree to disagree. But if theologies did not match, currency could not be exchanged. Images were banned because it was believed by both sides that images spoke 1,000 words that were impossible to regulate. Complex technical systems were put in place to calculate whose lives mattered, which led to the creation of the technology that we have today. After this, the ideas of preservation of the white race dissipated. Everyone in the all community wanted peace after so much fighting. They enthusiastically mixed and became brown. They are now known as the public district. The private district, known as one, mixed in order to gain more trust from the private district. They are also brown. Now everyone looks relatively the same, but theologies are different. This was a war on white supremacy. At first, white supremacy was dying out silently because inclusivity and unity between all colors and creeds is love, and love was thriving. But when white supremacy needed to strike back and fight back with one more push, convincing good people that they needed to support it because it would protect them from their nightmares, and those good people did the rest, imagining whatever they needed to in order to support what was obviously evil. What is the all? The all is what media represents as one. What is the one? The one is humanity. Specifically, one is a single person. One is not represented by the media. One is too complex. One is too complicated. One is the tree that is often overlooked for the forest. This statement rung true for supporters of all when the war was lost. So they built gardens with a central tree where they worship to remind them. They created laws against the use of image in media. Some say the image ban was so that videos of dove killing citizens would never go viral again. But all agree it was for the best, so that one image supremacy would never happen again. They swore that they would never be duped again. They found love instead of status. They married interracially, and they became mixed race.
Goose cleaned up her husband's plate and took the dirty dishes to the sink. Einstein wiped his mouth with his napkin, not noticing that the dove feather from Paul's visit was lying on the napkin. The feather stuck to his face. Goose gently brushed the feather from his face.
If I say the word sky, what comes to mind?
Monitor, police, public, open, free, fly, escape.
Ah, yes. But if you were from the public district, your answer might conclude with words such as heavens, blue, clouds, rain, wind, up.
Of course, they don't live in land confined by surveillance technology. They're free.
So, if I were to compare my love for you to the sky, that would either mean that my love for you is heavenly, blue, full of clouds, rain, and wind. Or it would mean that my love for you is possessive, that I monitor you always. I police your actions. I am the audience to you. I am like the public. I'm free and you aren't. I can fly. You need my love to escape. Now, every one of those words you thought of in relation to sky have infinite meanings as well. Heavens is usually positive, but can sometimes induce sadness. Blue can connote sadness, or conversely, honesty. Clouds can bring to mind fluffy, lighthearted feelings. Or, on the other hand, it can mean dark storms are approaching. Same with rain. Is this a calm, cool, rainy day? A much-needed shower after a drought? Or is this rain a signature of something depressing? Will wind bring something good or take from you? And what direction is up? But if I say my love for you is all of those things, together I build a story that clarifies my meaning. My love for you is like the sky, heavenly, blue, full of clouds, rain, and wind. You come closer to understanding my meaning. Your love for me is complicated, both good and bad, and both predictable and not like the weather. And without story, one could misunderstand sky for possessiveness or whatever their experience is with that symbol. Dove, they fly above us for protection. They protect and serve us. How lovely. We can call on them for help. They are our superheroes. Their ships are round like dinner plates. They can move at the speed of light. All will be there to help. We trust them with our lives. So Paul came by your office today?
I wanted my work to continue.
What was that, my dear?
I wanted my story to continue. But without mythology running, my contributions will no longer have meaning. If I apply my same contributions to science, that new program will misread my formulas. Science will interpret my formulas as something nonsensical. I'll have to start over using science-specific language. Even though each formula will be exactly the same, I'll need to use the specific code for science to rewrite everything.
Goose listened to her husband as he finally admitted what was on his mind. As Einstein tells Goose about Castor making him change programs from mythology to science, she thought to herself,
Poor thing, all of his work, all his expectations, his hopes for the future, gone by simply changing out one system for another. I have faith that he can rewrite his formulas into science, and I hope not too much will be lost in translation. When I have strong hopes like this, I meditate on them. Meditation usually turns my finish on to connect with the machine, where mythology was our program. I wonder if science will connect me to the machine in the same way.
Later that night, Goose retreats to her quiet room to meditate.
I meditate. My finish connects to the machine the same way it always has. I meditate on what my husband told me, though I know from what he told me I would no longer be able to connect to mythology, as I gave thoughts over to my finish. My husband told me that Castor made him switch programs from mythology over to science, and because of that, I didn't know if I would be able to connect to science. We have been running on mythology since before I was brought to the public district and fitted with my mechanical finish. My finish is designed to connect to mythology. But even though I did not expect that my finish would connect to science without an adjustment, I attempted anyway. I meditated like I would have before, abandoned my thoughts and listened to what we all tried to ignore. To my surprise, I seemed to connect, and my connection seemed the same. I thought connecting to science would feel different. When I connect to the machine, I no longer think linearly. I think outside of the usual boundaries of the English language. However, during this trip, my attention was directed to language. Something important was happening. The return of image was something the public applauded into existence, but something was wrong. The machine was telling me that even though the audience applauded this return of image, their choice would destroy them. There will be casualties. There will be chaos. The machine directed my attention to the list of terms. The first was role. Why was the machine showing this to me? Role is something I very rarely think about. It's a term meaning gender symbol. We wear symbols to express our gender after ceremony. Ceremony happens after grade school, around age 13. Before age 13, no private citizen is given a gender after ceremony. They are evaluated and given a role to show what gender they are. The next term was finish role. Cyborgs in the private district are sometimes given finishes for their gender, like me. Finish roles are gender symbols worn on the body. My finish role is this mechanical addition that allows my brain to directly connect to the machine. There are visible buttons along my spine and up the back of my neck. They were originally placed there when I arrived at the private district because of my weakness. I couldn't walk or move my limbs. The added finish reversed this condition and made me stronger than most. I became the strong woman. As a woman, my physical strength makes me abnormal, a sideshow by which the public is entertained. But I still play my gender role, even though my muscles make me abnormal for a woman. I am still a 3D printer that creates matter from what my husband designs. In my case, my husband designs programs for the machine, and the machine is our mass consciousness. My husband was the designer of much of mythology's program, and it is my responsibility to follow his theology and believe in it, making measured matter from what he designed. My responsibility is to ground, but Castor's new program seems just the same as mythology. Science doesn't act much different. The machine redirects my attention to more terms like gender symbols, which are worn on the body and are historically made of a specific racial feature. These racial features that define gender are called finish lines. Strange to say because it implies a context, a race. I always wondered what the origins were of the word race. Race can mean a group of people from an ethnic region, or it can mean a contest. And a finish, a mechanical device used to determine ideals. Finish line refers to gender, more like finish roles. Finish roles are gender symbols worn on the body, but finish lines are racial. We are supposed to be living in a post-racial society, but finish lines prove otherwise by their mere existence. Women are supposed to have brown eyes, the color of soil, because a woman's role is to be ground to man's design. And men are supposed to have blue eyes, because their ethereal mind design is from a place most high, blue like the sky. Genetic breeding has made it so this is usually the case, but every now and again a genetic mistake happens and linear rolling is applied to fix the problem. Linear rolling is when one must change a racial feature to fit a gender symbol. Some say these are no mistakes. Those people don't follow the design religiously like I do. They're known as fly, same word as too smart, and lonely or alone. I'd have to check the origins, but I've always heard they got the name fly because they aim to make themselves as tall as the designers. They fly to heights far from the soil from which they came. When I was much younger, I made the mistake of doing something, fly, and the dove drove me right back home where I belong. It wasn't anything too bad, nothing I needed to go to jail over. I escaped to the public district to find my birth parents. I found them, but they called Dove, reporting me as a scientifically criminal entertainer who needed to be returned to my stage. From now on, I follow ground, not my own curiosities as a good woman should. Even if the design fails me, it was never my own design that failed, and therefore I will never crash without a backup or warning. I'm running on autopilot. I live just like my birth parents, really. Their decisions are not their own because they're laid out by their religion. That way they don't need to be responsible for their actions. But what was this, Paul? That's funny. I see Paul inside of the machine as though he is connected to the machine like I am. But he isn't cyborg. I tuned in closer to feel what's happening. The machine tells me that my husband, Einstein, has made Paul cyborg. But why? He is now more creative, able to see solutions and ask questions he wasn't able to see before. Paul wanted to be more creative. Since he's connected, I can connect to his mind too. So I do. And in his mind, I see digits. Digits is controlling his mind. Digits is telling Paul that mythology is still running. That when my husband went to change his program from mythology to science, digits overrode his command. Mythology is still running, and digits can travel anywhere there is mythology. Paul turns and tells me everything telepathically.
But instead of passing along a true message, Paul lies. This is a huge change in Paul's character. Paul is usually the one who openly tells the truth no matter who he hurts or helps. With digits in his mind, however, he lies. But since Goose is so connected to mythology, she senses his lie.
I can clearly see Paul's strategy. I can clearly see that Paul is lying. But why would Paul suddenly lie? Why do I feel so strongly that mythology is still running? Maybe I'm misreading Paul because I feel so strongly about my faith. Maybe I'm wrong. But if I'm wrong, that means my connection to the machine is different than it was before. Doubt I must be experiencing science. The program must have changed. I don't know. I can't be sure. I logged out, stopped my meditation.
When Goose stops her meditation, she goes for a walk and bumps into Castor. Instead of being his usual cryptic self, Castor tells Goose everything that he knows. It seems Paul and Castor's characters have switched.
Magicians never tell their secrets. The world as I know it has ended. Now that Castor has included me in his plan, he tells me everything that I got from Paul telepathically, and he tells me the opposite of what Paul told me with his words. Paul was lying and Castor's telling the truth. It's as if they're entangled, and Paul's finish is a catalyst for that change.
Goose saw digits in Paul's mind when she connected to the machine. She knows that digits is controlling Paul's mind to produce matter, using Paul as a 3D printer. She knows that digits overrode Einstein's command to change mythology to science. And she knows that her husband believes that science is running. She sees that Castor and Paul are entangled and have switched when it comes to transparency. Now, Paul lies and Castor tells the truth. This is all confusing to Goose and definitely disturbs her ground. This completely uproots her religion and culture. The theology that she's supposed to uphold as the wife of Einstein has been undone like a Rubik's Cube, and the only way to reset this chaos is to sit with it and dedicate her own thought and strategy to align it all. But this isn't her place. Should she tell her husband what she knows? Or is she confused?
I must be mistaken. Silly me. My husband probably knows what he's doing. This doubt is probably a side effect of switching programs from mythology to science. I'm sure everything is fine. I trust my husband.
Goose decides to disregard all that the machine is telling her. She trusts her husband. All of this chaos is just what is needed in order to exorcise evil for the greater good. This is what Goose tells herself. This is what Goose commits herself to know as ground. Tune in next time for Ground, the final episode of Columbus Myth.
You've just heard Civil War, the 9th episode of Columbus Myth, written and produced by Kendra Dobson, recorded by John Rockwitz, sound mixed by Kayla Chappelle, starring Ruby Epkins as Goose, Nugent Stanton as the announcer, Krista Gonzalez and Julie Leonard as Dido, Lexter Rivera and Tita as Justin, Ruja Tanarwalker as Linda, Adam Martinez and Dan Pye as Columbus, and Adam Martinez as Einstein.